The movie begins in a house where we see a dead person, and it becomes clear that something happened to him. A little girl is standing nearby, looking very sad, scared, and nervous. She starts screaming loudly. Then the scene shifts, and we see a girl named Brooke waking up. It turns out she was seeing all of this in her visions. Brooke is the main character, and she is a photographer who, along with her friend Tanner, visits haunted houses, places, and buildings to take photos. They explore these creepy locations together. They're often driven by their friend CJ, who drops them off at these haunted spots and drives around the area to avoid getting noticed by anyone, making sure they don't get into trouble. CJ is a little scared of these places herself. Brooke and Tanner visit several houses, taking photos and feeling a mix of thrill and fear. During one of their trips, Brooke finds a picture of a father and daughter in a haunted house. This picture makes her think about her past, and she feels disturbed. However, she pulls herself together and leaves the house. On the way, Brooke tells Tanner and CJ that they should go to Franken Hills, a place that she hasn't heard much about, but it's known to be creepy, haunted, and dangerous. People who go there often don't return. Brooke suspects there's a connection between the place and the government, thinking it might have been some kind of training base or testing facility similar to another place called Deckett. Brooke asks CJ to come with her to Franken Hills, but CJ refuses, saying that the air in such places is often polluted and can mess with people's minds, causing them to see strange and scary things. She doesn't want to experience those Lucian senses, so she decides not to go. Brooke tells CJ to stay behind with Tanner for 3 hours while she explores, and she promises to return afterward. CJ leaves, and now Brooke and Tanner are on their own. Before they head into Franken Hills, Brooke shares some exciting news with Tanner. A big agency is going to feature one of her photos, which means she'll not only become famous, but also earn a lot of money. Tanner is thrilled to hear this, and becomes even more excited. The two then go inside the facility and begin taking photos. While exploring, Brooke comes across something strange written inside the building. It says, "I haven't forgotten my father's face." This phrase hits Brooke hard, reminding her of something painful from her past, though we don't know what it is yet. She takes a moment to calm herself before moving on. Brooke and Tanner reach a room where they find a testing chair, suggesting that experiments were conducted here, just as Brooke had suspected. The eerie atmosphere intensifies as they realize they are in a place that holds dark secrets. Now, as Brooke starts taking pictures, she notices a woman in a white dress standing outside the window. The woman suddenly disappears, but since Brooke is used to seeing strange things, she brushes it off, thinking it's not a real threat. She didn't take it seriously. Brooke and Tanner then go outside to get some fresh air. While outside, they encounter a homeless man. He has a long beard, dirty clothes, and a body covered in filth, with a terrifying look in his eyes. His presence gives off a sense of danger. The man starts moving toward them aggressively, so they both panic and run into a room, hiding inside. The man follows them, banging on the door and repeatedly asking why they are there and who sent them. Brooke and Tanner try to explain that it's just a misunderstanding. They only came to take photos and don't know anything about him. They insist no one sent them, and they have no idea what the man is talking about. The homeless man keeps accusing them of being sent after him, but they deny it. Finally, he calms down and steps back as Brooke tells him to. After taking a few steps back, Brooke cautiously opens the door, but instead of leaving, the man rushes inside and attacks them. Brooke gets hurt and starts to faint. As the man stands over her, he suddenly says that he remembers who she is. The scene shifts, and now we see a funeral. A man has died, and his wife and 2 daughters are present. Among the mourners, we also see the woman in the white dress from earlier. She speaks to the younger daughter and the mother, but gives a strange, intense look to the elder daughter. Everyone starts blaming the elder daughter for everything, saying it's all her fault and accusing her of causing the tragic events. The elder daughter becomes very upset as people shout at her, but then, suddenly, everyone disappears. The coffin in front of her begins to shake, and to her shock, her father emerges from it, perfectly fine. She is stunned to see him alive and hugs him, crying, saying that it's all her fault. Her father reassures her, calling her his little star and telling her that nothing is her fault. However, just as she starts to feel a little comforted, her father takes something strange, called the Key of Mind, out of his head and hands it to her. This scares her, as the whole scene turns horrifying. Her father, who was alive a moment ago, suddenly transforms into a terrifying ghost and begins to frighten her. At this moment, Brooke opens her eyes, realizing it was all a dream. She finds Tanner lying unconscious next to her, and both of them are trapped in a dirty, closed room. They see blood-soaked clothes around them, which deeply disturbs and terrifies them. Now, Brooke and Tanner hear the voice of the homeless man. He says he attacked them but apologizes, explaining that he didn't mean to do it. He just needed to be sure. Tanner asks if they are any danger to him and whether they were sent by his enemies. Tanner argues a little, but the man swears on his daughters that he will not harm them anymore. Now, both Brooke and Tanner are stuck in the room. When they finally come out of the house, they see the homeless man burning their camera reels and films. He explains that he just wants to be safe, and these reels could provide information to his enemies, so he is destroying the evidence. Tanner argues with him again, but the man is finishing up the destruction of their footage. Tanner manages to take back some of his camera gear. Both Brooke and Tanner ask about CJ, wondering if someone came to pick her up. The man says no one has come yet, and if their friend is going to come, she needs to arrive before nightfall. He warns them that whatever happens after dark is too horrifying to witness, and people won't be able to understand or survive it. Brooke looks out the window and thinks she sees CJ outside, so they both start to leave. But as they're about to go, the homeless man calls Brooke Little Star. This startles her, as it triggers a memory. Her father used to call her the same name. This shakes her mind because it seems too personal. They step outside, but when they realize CJ hasn't arrived and isn't there, they become even more worried. Brooke had just seen someone outside, but now no one was there. Tanner becomes increasingly anxious, thinking maybe the man is a werewolf or something that could kill them at night. Brooke, however, is more focused on the strange connection between the man and her father. Deciding to confront him, Brooke goes back inside to talk to the man. She asks him more about himself and his family, wondering why he swore on his daughters. The man explains that he has two daughters, 4 years apart in age, just like Brooke and her sister. This catches Brooke's attention even more. She asks him why he is away from his daughters, and he reveals that he has been separated from his family for a long time. He distanced himself to protect them from his enemies, fearing that they would be harmed if he stayed close. The man says that he can only remember his daughters, but he can never meet or see them again. He speaks with deep sadness, saying that he is consumed by pain, loneliness, and darkness. The most painful part, he says, is that death won't even come to him. He's trapped in his suffering, unable to escape. Now Tanner tells Brooke that it is almost night, and she needs to leave with him. He says he can't stay there anymore and is leaving, asking if she'll come with him. But Brooke refuses for obvious reasons, and Tanner, frustrated, storms off by himself. Outside, Tanner hears CJ's voice, but something is strange about the way she's talking. He thinks she's playing a joke and tells her to stop and come with him. CJ walks up and tells him she parked the car in the shed. But when they go there, the car is missing and suddenly, CJ disappears. Tanner panics and starts searching for her, but he can't find her anywhere. All he can hear is an eerie sound, which becomes more unsettling as it grows louder. Tanner gets really scared. As he moves forward, Tanner sees scarecrows, figures he used to be terrified of as a child, coming toward him. Filled with fear, he runs back inside the house. Once inside, he begins arguing with the homeless man, accusing him of bringing them to this place. The homeless man shouts back, saying he had warned them not to come, but they didn't listen. No one understands what is really happening. Brooke takes Tanner outside, telling him she also wants to leave, but it's raining heavily. They can't leave now, so they decide to wait until morning. Until then, Brooke insists they stay near the homeless man because he has a fire, and she wants to keep an eye on him to prevent anything dangerous from happening. Brooke also asks Tanner what he saw outside, but Tanner brushes it off, saying it's probably just the air, stress, or even mold affecting him. Meanwhile, Brooke starts having visions again, the same one she had earlier of a little girl whose father had committed suicide and who was blamed by everyone for it. It becomes clear that this little girl was actually Brooke herself. Both Brooke and Tanner go back inside and sit down. Suddenly, Brooke hears a noise. She goes to check the corridor and sees the woman in the white dress again. Brooke follows her outside, where she encounters her father. Her father warns her to stay away from the homeless man, saying that he had taken the life of his first blood. Brooke doesn't understand what her father means, as he had left her long ago and later killed himself, 15 years ago. This encounter leaves Brooke shocked and confused, struggling to make sense of how she's seeing her father, who had died many years ago. Brooke spots CJ's car nearby and realizes that CJ had died. She rushes back inside to wake Tanner and tells him everything, but he doesn't believe her. Meanwhile, the homeless man interrupts, confessing that he killed CJ because he thought CJ was sent by his enemies. Hearing this, Tanner and Brooke become furious. Brooke lashes out at the man, accusing him of being delusional. She tells him that he abandoned his family, and no father would ever do such a thing. It becomes clear that Brooke was projecting her feelings onto this stranger, seeing him as her father because, like her, he had 2 daughters with a 4-year age gap, just like Brooke and her sister. In her anger, Brooke is on the verge of killing the man, but when he apologizes, she stops herself. However, Tanner then notices something terrifying. The man starts transforming into a werewolf. To protect himself, Tanner kills the man, but it turns out the man wasn't actually turning into a werewolf. They were all seeing hallucinations. Tanner goes to talk to Brooke, but she sees him in an evil form, which drives her to kill Tanner as well. At this point, it becomes clear what was really happening inside the house. There was a leak in the house, releasing black mold spores, which is why the movie is called Black Mold. The mold was affecting everyone's brain at a neurological level, causing them to suffer from a dangerous condition. The mold made people hallucinate, showing them their deepest fears and worst nightmares. For Tanner, it was the scarecrows he feared as a child. For Brooke, it was her overwhelming guilt about her father. The mold was affecting Brooke's mind severely, and she started imagining things. The man she thought was her father was only a hallucination. In reality, her father had died years ago, and the mold triggered her suppressed guilt and trauma. Brooke had always felt responsible for her father's death, and being inside the house with the mold brought all these feelings to the surface. The homeless man wasn't her father. He was just a figment of her imagination. The mold had twisted her mind, and it also made her mentally unstable, making her believe she was somehow connected to her father's tragic end. This was why Brooke had been emotionally unstable from the beginning of the story. The black mold intensified her guilt and led her to a point where she could no longer distinguish between reality and hallucination. Because they inhaled the mold, everyone started experiencing lucid dreams at night. This is why the homeless man had warned them not to stay in the house, but it was too late. They had to spend the night there. The effects of the black mold began to take hold, causing them to see strange and terrifying things. The werewolf they saw was likely a manifestation of Tanner's fear. He imagined the homeless man turning into a werewolf, though nothing of the sort was actually happening. It's also possible that the story about Brooke's father wasn't real. It could have been something she made up in her mind, possibly as a way to cope with her trauma. Maybe Brooke had run away from her family, convincing herself that none of them were still alive. As for CJ, the homeless man was paranoid and terrified of his enemies. He may have mistaken CJ for one of them and ended up killing her. CJ had come to pick up Brooke and Tanner, but she also met a tragic fate. In the end, it seems like Brooke is the only one left alive. What happens next is unclear. Whether the police will arrive to take her away or what will become of her is unknown. And with that, the movie ends.